Hello, and welcome to the Who Asked for This podcast, the topical and nonsensical podcast hosted by me. And today I have my dear, sweet, lovely friend, Tom Edwards. Hello, Tom.
Hello, John. My sweet, dear, lovely friend.
My sweet prince. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm cool, man. I'm all good in the hood. I'm dealing with life as it comes. So happy to be here, to be honest.
Yeah, we've just been to the pub and had a nice Coke, haven't we? So we're feeling fresh. We're feeling ready for it.
It's a no alcohol zone in my temple of a body.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in a later episode. But today's episode is your overrated and underrated bands.
Yeah, it was kind of an idea, wasn't it? We were shooting about, throwing about ideas that we could talk about, and I think about it a lot when I listen to music. Quite heavily involved in listening to music and playing music, and I always think like what people's public perception is of certain bands and like their people's take on them, and then in turn my take on that as well. So it would be interesting just to see what other people think about it as well. If anyone else wants to like have an opinion on it, I guess, because everyone's got an opinion.
They certainly do. I think one thing that was obviously came up tonight, didn't it, was that like me and you are like music enthusiasts, and like different people have different kind of like takeaways on music, don't they? Like some people, it's literally just background noise, and it's like basically just like dead air for like not dead air, like white noise for them, and just something to like block out the silence. But like for me, anyway, it is like my lifeblood. Like I can't go a day without listening to music, and I think sometimes people kind of get a bit like funny about criticism and being critical and stuff like that, whereas I see it as a very important thing as a music fan. Like even the bands you absolutely love, you know, you've got to kind of have that approach where you're able to, you know, distinguish when they're at the top and when they're at the lowest and stuff like that. So I usually do kind of walk into, you know, I walk into like songs and music, and I always am kind of like evaluating it in my head. I'm like, is this good? Where could this be better? What went wrong? You know, the background and stuff like that.
I feel like it's from a musical mind. So obviously we've both played music live. We both play instruments. We've both studied music, and we both look at it in an analytical way. And obviously music is subjective for so many reasons, and we take that frame of mind of we listen to it and we do analyse it, but at the same time we're quite subjective and we're quite on the fence with it as well. And some of our favourite bands, while we share a lot of similar interests and similar bands, we also differ on a range of them as well. But we can admit that some of our favourite artists aren't at the best, and we will be the first people to shoot it down and say, oh, that was a poor album, we expected more. And on that front as well, and I know you agree with me on this, John, albums, from a personal opinion, should be listened to as an album and not picked apart as a few songs on a playlist, which I know people do, but that's just my opinion. Music obviously is ingested and taken in whichever way anyone would like to take it in, and that's fine, because obviously music should be enjoyed regardless of how they enjoy it. But my personal take on it is that a full album should be digested as one, and it's a full an experience, almost a transcendental, if that's the right word for it, experience.
I like to take music as like a case-by-case basis sometimes. Like sometimes I just want music to listen to and kind of enjoy and have fun. It's a bit silly. And sometimes like I enjoy a bit of crap, to be honest. I enjoy a bit of slop. I love a bit of like early 2010s like pop music and stuff like that. A bit of Taylor Swift. Some
of the cheesy stuff, some of the best. The most recognisable and stuff you can just belt out and sing. Like I'm a sucker for like a lot of like cheesy love songs and things like that. And like you call it pop music and stuff like that. Like, so for example, like on the way here, me and John were listening to like James Blunt, and we were both belting it out in the car. And that's like, you could regard that as cheesy, but again, that's a public perception of, say, that artist or that type of music. But there should be no shame in what you like, really, should there? But yeah, I agree. We both listen to music in a very analytical way, and like I like to listen to things and see a lot of chord patterns as well, and how music's assembled and the relation of the instrumentation compared to the other instruments and the overdubbing, you could say. And I also feel like we shouldn't really be defined by genre either.
Should we get into our overrateds first?
Okay, so I'm gonna throw out one here just to get a talking point going straight away. From a personal opinion, overrated, Iron Maiden.
Oh, you're in it now. We're in it. We're in the woods.
I went for the jugular.
So Iron Maiden, like to be honest with you, I don't find myself listening to Iron Maiden very often. But for me, previously in a previous episode when we talked about Korn, they're a very like sentimental band to me, and they were like a huge influence on me growing up. And it was one of the first bands that I really kind of properly got into and started like diving down. Now, I would argue that they are not overrated. I think they are perfectly rated, slightly underrated, because I think bands that are kind of like their peers and on their kind of level are given a bit too much love, whereas Maiden aren't given enough.
Okay, that's fair, and I see that, and I look at it and go, there's a lot of genres and a lot of types of music that I always kind of put myself out there and try to listen to when I know I'm not listening to enough of a certain thing. So like classical music is definitely one from like the modern age that not a lot of people listen to. So I try my best to listen to stuff like that. I try my best to listen to a lot of free jazz, and it's not always very palatable. Iron Maiden, obviously, in was it the 1980s they were big?
Yeah, I'd say their peak was pretty much the whole decade of the 80s, to be honest.
Okay, so the entire of the 80s, and obviously you had like your Metallicas and stuff as well. I'm sure you will. But like Iron Maiden were just always one of those bands that I just couldn't click with. There was one or two songs that was like, oh yeah, like I like them songs, they're good songs. But as a whole, a lot of their stuff sounded very samey, and a lot of their stuff, even in like say in the 2000s, I thought they sounded pretty outdated. And I feel like they have done nothing particularly special to put them on such a pedestal. Like, I get that they're iconic. So they've got, is it Eddie, the mascot? Yeah. They've got him. He's very iconic. He's a great logo, the trooper with the Union Jack and all that stuff. Cool. Like, it looks great. But in terms of the music, and that's solely what I'm going off, I just don't think they're anything special. And that's just me, because they're like lauded as being like, oh, heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. They're up there with all those names, and they've just never done it for me.
It's interesting, really, because I'm trying to have a think. You know how can I combat this and stick up for the Maiden side. As I say, I don't find myself listening to them very much in modern times. I think you'll probably remember when I was a kid, I always had like Iron Maiden t-shirts on and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I remember like when I wore them t-shirts back in like, we're talking 2003, 2004, and like everyone else around me, like yourself and the people that we went to school with, they were all listening to like the contemporary metal bands like Trivium and fucking Bullet for My Valentine.
All very much of the time, wasn't it? Like the current metal bands that were in, the artists that were there then,
like Lamb of God and stuff like that. And I remember people like looking at me going like, who the fuck are Iron Maiden? And I'd be like, oh, like this metal band from the 80s, and like, bloody hell, it'd be like 100 years old. This is back in the 2000s when they probably would have only just been hitting 40.
It does tell a lot, that, doesn't it? Yeah. Like for our minds back then saw them as old men, and they were just middle aged back then. Whereas now they are like 70, something like that. They're not. I think they're no spring chickens, are they?
Definitely getting into the 70s. But I think around about, it must have been like the early 2010s, like they seemed to like blow up and everyone knew who they were, and you'd see everyone in the t-shirts and stuff like that. They had a bit of like a revival. So I think when you get into that area, I'd say like, they started becoming more of an overrated band. And I think in more recent years, they've become less of a band and more of a brand.
I was going to touch on this, and there's other bands as well that are going to come up in this list that are similar, that you see people out and about dressing like, say, for example, Alt with an Iron Maiden shirt on, with, say, like a Black Sabbath shirt on, and they've never listened to Black Sabbath. They've never listened to Iron Maiden, but they're wearing it because it looks cool. And like, I get it, because like like I said, the iconography of Iron Maiden looks cool, and it's marketed really well. But solely on the music, I just don't think they're anything special, and I've always thought that.
I'll agree on one aspect of they have a formula and they do stick to that formula. But like when you think of a band that, I don't know if this is on your list, but when you think of a band, for example, AC/DC, that have such basic formula that they never really kind of tap outside of. Now, I could bring up some Maiden tracks and even albums where they did dance a little bit outside of their comfort zones and they did branch out a bit, but there always has been a formula when it's always been Steve Harris's galloping bass, it's always been Bruce Dickinson's opera aristocratic vocals. It's always been powerful, historical event based. There is a formula, like I can't argue that. I have to put my hands up to that. I think their recent work has been quite lackluster, to be honest, and I know a lot of Maiden fans would kind of crucify me for saying that, but I really haven't been a fan of their last two albums. I think when you talk about legacy and what they've done, is like, to me, I'm not the biggest metal fan, so it must say something that I like them as much as I did. Well, yeah, especially as much as I did back in the day, because to be honest with you, I haven't really got the time of day for Judas Priest or like any of the, I can't even like think of any metal bands off the spot, but them kind of 80s, like onwards, even before them metal bands, they just never did much for me, especially like Judas Priest and all that. It always felt a bit schlock, a bit camp, a bit cheese, and I think Maiden did bring a bit more of a maturity to it with their music and sound, and I think that was kind of the grab for myself.
It was very much, from what I've gathered from it, like it was very much of the time. Iron Maiden were very in the right place in the 80s. They belonged, a bit like Black Sabbath, a bit like Judas Priest. They had a formula, and it worked there. And like you said, Bruce Dickinson is very operatic, over-the-top vocals, and the Steve Harris pumping bass lines. What they do, they're clearly very good at. And I respect and appreciate that, but it's just never been my cup of tea. And I've just always thought they're overrated, and maybe it's because of their marketing department. Who knows?
Okay, well, before we move on, we'll give a little. So you've come to the table with Overrated. I think I will rate them as rated. I think they deserve what they're given, no more, no less, really. So I think that's the first one out the way with. So
John has spoken.
I have spoken, and it's true. So what you got next for us, Tommy boy?
Okay, well, I don't know whether you wanted an overrated or an underrated. I don't know whether you wanted me to mix it about a bit.
Keep giving us the overrated, then we'll do all the underrateds.
Okay, so overrated, and the next one's kind of like a bit of a more obvious one. I'm going to run with the popular choice and drop Taylor Swift's name into the overrated front now. But before we raise any feathers again, I like Taylor Swift. I like her early stuff. I think it's very good. She's clearly a very talented songwriter. The Folklore and what was the other album? Folklore and Evermore. Evermore. Yeah. Two fantastic albums, and I really enjoyed them. And I enjoyed her earlier stuff as well. But obviously, she's on a pedestal now. She's like one of the best-selling artists in like the world ever. I don't think you can really argue that that's not overrated, no matter how talented she clearly is.
A year ago, I'd probably disagree. Now, I completely agree. Like I've kind of really, like, it was always a bit of a meme that there was like a big Swiftie and a big Taylor Swift head, and I did listen and enjoy all the albums and stuff. I've kind of gone off her more as a person than her music. I still think there's quite a bit you can get from the music, like kind of like her antics and how she's constantly in the kind of mainstream is somewhat like frustrating and annoying. Now her music itself, most of it, I would say it is just overrated, kind of generic pop, radio friendly stuff. The two albums you just mentioned, Folklore and Evermore, I think are brilliant. More folklore than Evermore, but I think Folklore is a great album, and I really did wish that she went down that avenue where she seemed to have just done it for a bit of a kind of experimentally lockdowny phase, and then went straight back to kind of going back to what she's comfortable and what she's safe with, and obviously what her fan base and the radio demand, because I don't remember much of them two albums getting much radio play besides like the two lead singles, whereas like you look at the albums she brings out, usually you're getting like 5, 6, like every song's getting like radio play and stuff like that. So she's definitely well overrated at this point, because as I say, she's just like worldwide phenomenon, isn't she?
To pull back on what you said there, the Evermore and Folklore, like I've got Folklore on vinyl. I know you have as well. I think it's a fantastic album, but you have to look at the takeaways from that. They were both recorded during lockdown. They were recorded, and she worked with a member of the band The National, who are a fantastic band, by the way.
Yeah, I know you have something for that.
And Justin Vernon from Bon Iver, and I'm a massive Bon Iver fan. So I couldn't fault that at all. And it was very much in the style, low-level acoustic. Everything was stripped back a bit, but the production was quite moody. They were brilliant albums. But yeah, I don't think, sorry, to pull back on it, I don't think there can be any argument over that she's overrated. She's everywhere. You can't avoid Taylor Swift now, can you?
Yeah, when the last album came out, Midnight, I liked it when it first came out, but over a few listens, I think there's only really like 3 or 4 songs I've really pulled from that album that I kind of enjoy, and I think the rest is not that good. So I think on that basis, like, you know, the music is very overrated. The fact that like she's selling like 50 different variants on vinyl and they're just selling like mad. And to be honest, before Folklore Nevermore, I think she was going down a bit of a creative slump. After the 1989 album, there was like Reputation, and I think that was such like a pandering to kind of mainstream music and her trying to get some hits out there and stuff like that. And then after that was like Lover, which, to be honest, I don't even think I've listened to that album, but I thought the singles off that were just utter shit, to be honest with you.
I couldn't tell you a single song from that Lover album. I know you like 1989. I wasn't a fan. Wasn't a fan of 1989 at all. With the Midnights, I listened to that, I think, only 2 times all the way through. And the first listen, I was really disappointed. Second listen, I was even more disappointed. Nothing stuck out to me. Again, I couldn't really remember anything from that, which says a lot, really. And I really tried. I tried to enjoy it. I was looking forward to when that came out to say, oh, it looks like we're going to get something different. And we didn't. It was just, it seemed to me very mundane. So yeah, that's Taylor Swift on the overrated front. Would you like another overrated artist to ponder, John?
Yeah, so I agree with you there. Completely overrated. Just to go on a quick side tangent, just obviously she's got like a very strong fan base, and from what I've noticed is like you can't put a word out of place with them. I think that's a problem with music and fandoms in particular, is that sometimes they aren't open to this criticism, and the artists and the music that they create can do absolutely like no wrong. You know what I mean? I think that's why you got to come into something with a bit of a critical eye sometimes. But yeah, overrated. Next band.
I'm gonna throw one out there for you, John, because not a band. I know you're not big on your hip hop. I'm gonna see if you can piece together what you can. Overrated. Going to offend a lot of people. Tupac Shakur. He, while very talented, clearly plagued by a lot of personal issues that involve obviously criminality and things like that. But his music is really good. But I think that is down to it being well produced by your people like Dr. Dre and things like that. And I just think if he hadn't passed away, would he be lauded in such high regard? I think Notorious B.I.G., people compare them, is considerably better. Your opinion, John? Sorry.
Yeah, so obviously you are going out my wheelhouse a little bit here. I'm not the biggest rap or hip hop fan, although there are certain artists I do enjoy. I think this goes back to kind of what I said with like Iron Maiden, funnily enough, that a band or an artist can turn into a brand. I think Tupac is a brand. I think people like more what he kind of stood for and what is kind of messages were and stuff more than the actual music itself. Sometimes it's trendy to have a Tupac t-shirt or something like that. I think another case of not to spiral off is Bob Marley is like a massive kind of like case of that instance where he attracts a lot of potheads, weed smokers, purely based on the fact that he liked weed. And I think
it was a religion for him, wasn't it? The Rastafarian religion. But I agree as well. People latch onto it, but then again, is that just good marketing? His music obviously was very good. He was a talented artist, and I fully appreciate that. But when people think like to leave such a lasting, iconic look on a style of music, when you think of reggae music, you think of Bob Marley. Yeah. Your mind doesn't instantly jump to like Chronics or like Toots and the Maytals. Toots and the Maytals were around years before Bob Marley, decades before, but no one jumps to that. They jump to Bob Marley. Bob Marley is the Beatles. He's what the Beatles did to rock music, is what he did to reggae. A very niche, small genre of music, if I can say that. But yeah, I'm totally on board with that. His merchandise, people buy it and people jump on the weed smoking side of it, I think, don't they, rather than the music. And
again, very limited knowledge in this field, so I don't want to like overstep or anything like that. But what I would say to try and defend Tupac is before him, were there any standalone rappers? Like from what I remember, like the early form of hip hop, it was like NWA and kind of hip hop groups, Run DMC, stuff like that. Was he kind of like the first one to break out as a solo artist? Or
no, he wasn't.
No.
If you look at some of the early hip hop groups, so Tupac was in the 90s, early 90s, and in the 80s, I don't know whether it was late 70s actually. Grandmaster Flash obviously was a solo artist, and he was one of the first rappers ever.
Was he?
World Class Wrecking Crew was where Dr. Dre came from, and that was the 80s.
Yeah.
Or pretty much everyone in the NWA split off and did solo projects before Tupac. So it wasn't anything original at the time. His music spoke to people on a mass level, and I get that, and I appreciate it, and I do, and have personally enjoyed Tupac's music for decades, but I just don't think he's as good as people hold him, like in that high regard.
We'll have to let other Tupac heads weigh in on that one, because I really can't speak for it. I think I've probably heard in my life a total of 2 or 3 Tupac songs. I don't mind them, but I more like the songs that were sampled on them more than the actual. I'm not the biggest rap fan, to be honest. I think the biggest kind of rap artist that I've ever really had an interest in is Eminem, obviously, and Kanye West, but that's a whole other rabbit hole of its own, really.
I was going to say they could make lists of their own, really, of overrated. But yeah, next, you ready for a next?
Bring it on, baby.
Okay, left field again. Overrated. I'm sure you'll be able to have an opinion on this one. Elvis Presley.
That is an interesting one, because he's up there with like the Beatles and that. Like, as I say with Tupac, when I said before, like, was he the first kind of breakout? I think Elvis obviously wasn't the first rock and roll singer. He wasn't the first, but it would be fair to say he was the first rock star.
He was iconic again, and I'm noticing a pattern with the overrated people is that not necessarily musical ability or. Well, catchy songs, yes, but more how they are marketed and what they represent. So, for example, I can tell you right now, Elvis Presley could dance, and damn, obviously, could he sing? And he had a very iconic voice. You hear Elvis sing, you know it's Elvis Presley, don't you? Pretty matter of fact, you know it's him. However, Elvis never wrote any of his own songs. I don't think he ever wrote one. That I hope that's correct. I'm 99% sure he never wrote any of his own music, and he was I'm going to be really generous and say a bang average rhythm guitar player at best, if that says everything.
Yeah, I'm just So I think the thing from what I've heard, I have actually heard a few like big Elvis fans talk about him, and from what I understand is like his very early stuff was that kind of like poppy schlocky Elvis on holiday, Elvis in Hawaii and all that shit.
all the gimmicky stuff that people could jump on board.
Yeah, he was a gimmick. He was a Barbie doll, you know what I mean? He was a toy to play with. I think later on in his career is when he musically evolved a bit, and I think a lot of people go on about I'm talking out my ass here because I don't know enough, but I know he did various. What was that song like, In the Ghetto and stuff like that, and he really kind of did develop as an artist. And I think by the back end of his career, he really was proving his worth and proving his talent, whereas back in the early day it was about being that kind of like being that like sex figure and all that. And not to get like too political into this, but from me history is basically Elvis, the whole selling point of Elvis was he sung black music but he was white, so they could play him on the radio.
Yeah. It was a lot of politically motivated under the staircase, pulling the strings kind of thing, wasn't it? I'm not saying Elvis wasn't talented. He was obviously, I forgot to mention, he was a talented pianist as well. He could play piano, but I know he obviously he was a great singer, but I don't think he was a musician really, and he definitely wasn't a songwriter. Are you ready for the next?
Yeah, so I will give Elvis rated I won't fully agree with you there. I think he's perfectly rated for what he is. I think he's a man of a former generation, and I think as like new generations come in, like ourselves and like Gen X, Gen Z, and onwards and stuff like that, he's gonna kind of fade away in like in the public like eye and figure, you know what I mean? And he'll be this historical relic. But yeah, I'll give him rated. So, but bring the next one on, mate.
Okay, so I have got two more in the overrated section, and they are both rock artists that you will know and you will have an opinion on, John. And we haven't even started on the underrated yet, dear God. Okay?
Yeah.
Foo Fighters, overrated. Your thoughts?
100%, 100%, 100%. I'm sorry if my mum's listening because she's a huge Foo Fighters fan. 100% overrated. I think a couple of years back, I did myself like a little challenge where I said to myself, I'm going to listen to like every album from an artist. And I started with the Foo Fighters.
Oh, what a choice that is.
And man, I'm sorry to any Foo Fighters fanatics out there, but it was a fucking slog. They usually you come away from this and you find more than you originally had. So you listen to the albums, you're like, oh, this is a good song. It wasn't a single, it was an album track. You never heard it on the radio. Oh, this is great. I came away with it with no more extra tracks that I became a fan of. I think that albums are just crammed to the brim with like filler, generic rock. Like, I'm really feeling bad about getting really harsh about this because so far I've been very leveled and like I've even like defended quite a few of these artists.
It's okay.
Foo Fighters, like they are fine for what they do. They are the vanilla ice cream of music. They are the white bread of music, you know what I mean?
my thoughts on it, and I agree with you there, John. I agree with you. They obviously feature multiple talented musicians, and when I say talented musicians, I mean really talented. Dave Grohl, say no more. Taylor Hawkins, say no more. But I know people people I used to work with, and not particularly into music, but they would all get together and go to Foo Fighters concerts. And they are for people who are sort of on the fringes of rock music that can get behind the catchy songs and get behind this is a rock show. I like the Foo Fighters, but if a band ever screamed to me greatest hits album, it's the Foo Fighters. It's artists like Elvis Presley and people like that. Like, you could listen to the studio albums, but dear God, you're going to have an headache. Yeah. You are better off buying a greatest hits album because the filler on some of their albums is exactly that, filler.
If you were to look at my vinyl collection now and you go and look at all my Foo Fighters albums, I've got one and it's the greatest hits. That's all I need and that's all I ever want. I think when you say talented, they're all talented musicians, but like when it comes to crafting a song, it's like I think that their greatest song must be, in my opinion, like Everlong or something like that. Even their greatest hit songs, I'm just not that like. I never hear "Learn to Fly" and I'm never like, oh, let's fucking go turn this jam up. This is a fucking jam. This I've never done that.
I used to cover "Learn to Fly," so I know it inside out. I also covered Everlong in like cover bands and things like that. They're good songs, not difficult to play, well written, very catchy, but they're going to stand the test of time. And you know they are. They're going to stand the test of time and they're going to be lauded as one of the best rock bands ever. And that's fine. That's okay. But they're never going to be my favourite band. They're never going to be my favourite artist. And I think they're so up there in like getting nominations for awards of best rock act, best rock album. And I just don't think they do anything particularly groundbreaking. They don't break the mold. They've got a formula and it works for them. Fantastic. It gets more neutral music fans into rock music. Fantastic. If that's what their role is. But I think they're massively overrated, in my opinion.
I 100% agree. I do feel bad because, as you say, everyone's entitled to listen to what they want and enjoy what they want. I think you kind of touched a nerve on the fact of, as you say, they're always the Grammy winners. They're always like, you know, the nominators and they're always like the winners of all these awards and stuff. I think that's wrong because that's where the whole point of overrated comes in, is they're getting looked at above other bands that deserve the credit that they're obviously not getting, because Foo Fighters is the radio friendly rock music that your mum and your dad will listen to, and Susan on the till will listen to, and you can play it in Asda, and everyone will have a good time. You know what I mean?
And it doesn't offend anyone, and it's just perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
I think they're also a band as well, and I think this is the problem with some bands, is like, sometimes I think artists release albums for the sake of releasing albums. But it's like, oh, it's that time of year again, it's been a few years, let's release an album. Since I did that whole, like, start to finish listen, I'm sure they've released, like, 3 albums since then. And that was only in the space of, like, 5-6 years or something like that.
That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me at all, and that's okay, because they've got a loyal fan base that will listen to it and buy the records, and good on them. Good on them.
So yeah, I agree. Overrated. You've actually made. I've thought up with another band I can throw at you on the overrated now.
Oh, go on. We should just do a podcast just for overrated and save the underrated ones for a next time. At this rate.
So yeah, this episode is changing on the fly, guys. This is now purely the overrated artists.
It doesn't have to be.
Right. So do you want to get the rest of yours out with, and I'll give you at least 2 of mine.
Okay. Well, I've got one more on the overrated, and then I've got one band that kind of tips the scales and somewhere in the middle, and I wanted to see your opinion on them. My opinion, right, scratch that. I'll come back to that one. Right, my last overrated artist, in my opinion, the Rolling Stones. John, your thoughts?
I think, to be honest, you've probably listened to more Rolling Stones than me. I would agree. And anything I've heard from them, I've enjoyed. I appreciate that, obviously, it's not my generation's music. It's not my generation's sound. Everything I've heard from them nothing's ever really upset me or set me off or anything like that. But as you say, when they're like, no, like, everyone's wearing the t-shirt, it's band versus brand again. I've got one Rolling Stones album in my collection, and it's like, I think it's...
Is it the greatest hits?
No, it's not actually. Is it Let It Bleed with the cake on it?
Oh, okay. You see, I haven't heard that one. I've listened to a lot of Rolling Stones. My favourite album is those girls. Great album, right? Even though I can't properly get the name of it. Great album, but they're one of those bands that you buy a greatest hits album, and their greatest hits album, I had one, and it was like 4 discs because they've got so many errors. But I like the Rolling Stones, and this is what I wanted to make a point of in this list. None of the artists I have said, unless I've specified that I did not enjoy them, like Iron Maiden. I enjoy all of the artists, thoroughly enjoy all of them, but I think they're overrated. I think the Rolling Stones are a very talented band, really good band. Again, a band of the time. They were a band of the 60s and the 70s. When you compare them, my personal opinion, to the Beatles, as many people do, it's night and day. Night and day, mate. Beatles win hands down, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion. Now, the Rolling Stones released a album last year, 2023, and the Hackney Diamonds, you listen to that.
Don't you get angry with me. Go on, give us one.
Pretty much that, yeah. Don't get angry with me. Why are you angry? Yeah, that album, I was quite looking forward to, because I quite liked that angry song that came out. And then that was it. It was a very vanilla album. Even Lady Gaga featured on it and things like that. And it was just, it's the Rolling Stones. You know what you're getting. You know exactly what you're going to get. You've gone to the sweet shop and you wanted a bag of Walker's crisps, and there they are. Oh, there's a Walker's crisp. It's ready salted. I know exactly what they taste like. I like the taste of them. Yeah. Am I going to get a naughty cheese and onion in there? No, of course I'm not. I'm going to get ready salted, the Rolling Stones. The brand is fucking everywhere, and they are vanilla. They're good, but you know what you're getting.
You mentioned before the Beatles. I think that's an interesting one, because the thing is with the Beatles, and to be honest, they're not one of my favourite bands, but I don't really want to go there. But the thing is with the Beatles is they changed and they did various things, and throughout looking back at it now,
they evolved.
Yeah, compared to many bands' careers, it was short lived. It was only about a decade, if that. And during that decade, they did so many different interesting things. They branched out. Now, the Rolling Stones, as far as I'm aware, unless they've got like a black metal album that they did in 2003 that I'm not aware of, they've never really changed. It's always the 12-bar blues and stuff like that. But this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to give them a little bit of defence. If I had the choice between playing Here Comes the Sun or Paint It Black, I'm going to pick Paint It Black. If I've got a choice between A Hard Day's Night or Give Me Shelter, I'm going to pick Give Me Shelter.
That is fair. I think a lot of people compare the Stones and the Beatles because not only were they around at the time and they were like the biggest British band, was early Beatles and early Stones were very, very similar. The early variations before the Beatles evolved, before the Stones evolved. The Stones went more rock heavy, the Beatles went more psychedelic and experimental, and that's fine. But I still think the Rolling Stones are massively, massively, massively overrated. And that's just my opinion.
I will agree to an extent. I think they're rated. I think what they did. I like to look at it from like a historical kind of point of view and the influence they had, especially on like how their music was like a massive influence on kind of like the soundtrack of Vietnam and stuff like that. But yeah, I think your point is valid.
Thank you for validating my point. Okay, so that was a brief list. I'm sure there's so many I can think of. When you ponder it even more, you can go through and think of so many. But I do have a special mention to a band that, and it is a band, is to some people overrated, to some people big fans underrated. Right? Okay. And I like to see if I can get your opinion on this, and if we can take away from what we've taken so far from all of the overrated bands and artists that I've mentioned, is massive merchandise, great marketing, very unique, but at the same time, nothing particularly groundbreaking in what they've done. Iconic.
Ready to hear this.
Nirvana.
Oh, you've dropped it there, man. You've dropped it.
Drop the bomb, man.
I agree.
But what are they? Are they underrated or are they overrated?
Oh, I think they are overrated. But it's one of them. There's so much to unpack here because they were a revolutionary band, and you can't take that away. But
there's levels to it, isn't there? There really is levels to it. There's the songwriting, which is musicianship wise really simple, but songwriting wise really catchy, incredible, and to do it in such a unique genre was groundbreaking. Right? They're iconic. Everyone knows who Nirvana is. Everyone knows who Kurt Cobain is. Everyone knows the Nirvana logo with the daft little smiley face and the tongue. Dave Grohl, obviously a byproduct of Nirvana, super, super talented musician and songwriter in his own right. But again, everyone knows who Nirvana is.
I had a bit of a Nirvana listen not too long ago, and I listened to the Nevermind album, and then I listened to the MTV Unplugged album, and I was not super impressed. I was not super impressed. When I was a kid, we're talking 13, 14, I loved Nirvana. Like pretty much every other kid from our kind of generation growing up. I loved them.
They were a gateway. They were a massive gateway for me into the alt rock world.
Same here, definitely. They really were kind of like pretty much like most kind of teenagers. Like I idolized Kurt Cobain. I fucking had my hair I was all into that whole like grunge aesthetic. I loved it. As I got older, I found myself listening to them less and less, and then it got to a point where I would listen to them and I'd be sat there and I'd be like, I don't like this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can relate to that. So for a lot of people, music is like a time capsule, isn't it? And it brings you back to a certain place, and it can even make you smell certain smells, see certain colours, and I can relate to that massively. But with Nirvana now, I listen to Nirvana out of a nostalgia buzz of, Heart-Shaped Box, what a great song. Timeless. Makes me think of when I was a teenager and I used to love Heart-Shaped Box and like Smells Like Teen Spirit. These days, I can't really listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit, and there's probably a few reasons for that. So in the first ever band I was in, we covered Smells Like Teen Spirit, and admittedly, part and parcel of the whole grunge and the punk movement really is that anyone can pick up a guitar, chuck a bit of distortion on it, and you can play it. Smells Like Teen Spirit is a basic song to play. It's your gateway guitar song. You pick up guitar, one of the first songs you learn is Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it's really catchy, really effective.
It was one of mine.
It's great. There's nothing wrong with it, but I can't now go back and listen to that song and thoroughly enjoy it unless I'm in a club, in like an alt rock club, and it comes on. Everyone's like, "Well, yes, well, it's in spirit, yeah. When the lights out, it's just danger." Like, but you can't like. I wouldn't listen to that out of choice.
I wouldn't either. Like when in one of my previous jobs where I kind of just had the radio on a lot in my van as I went from job to job, I'd listen to like Radio X, which is like kind of like Britain's kind of generic, it kind of indie rock, alt rock kind of station. They would play Teen Spirit from time to time. I always enjoyed it, and I always like really liked kind of like the atmosphere, and there really is an energy to that song that is like a lightning in a bottle kind of moment. But I'm never sitting there and I'm never like, you know what, Dinesware smells like Teen Spirit. But I'm like that with any other Nirvana. I'm just like, there isn't much from them from my recent re-listen. No, I didn't listen to Bleach. I didn't listen to In Utero. But
I personally thought In Utero is their best album.
Yeah.
But again, I also, as someone that values studio albums, and I know how much you also value studio albums, I think Nirvana are probably, and this is going to offend a lot of people, are probably best kept to a greatest hits.
I would agree, because when I was listening to them, there were moments where I actually cringed. I would, like, you know, when Kurt Cobain would squeal and scream at the top of his lungs and stuff like that. Back in the day, you'd listen to like, whoa, this isn't what the Rolling Stones did. This isn't what the Beatles did. This isn't what fucking any of these generic bands did. And the thing is with Nirvana and grunge, and it's a whole thing that I'm fascinated with, is it killed any rock band, any metal band or anything like that was around at the time. Never recovered from Nirvana. Iron Maiden, as you previously mentioned, prime example. After Nirvana, when the 90s came around, their albums changed, and they changed for the worst. And it was kind of known as their dark period, their kind of flop period, you know what I mean? Same with like all these bands like Van Halen and all that, all these metal bands, they died a death, and it was all because of the grunge movement. And in a way, I think it was a good way to it was like the meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. And I think
in the rock world only, really.
Yeah, in the rock world, yeah. When you say overrated and you kind of go look at that, it's like what influence they had. The influence was massive, and you can't take that away. The thing is, as you going back to bands and being in a band, I played gigs a bit more recently than you did. The amount of people that were just being Nirvana on that scene was like ridiculous, to the point where it was like you're wearing your influence on your sleeve, and then you're just full on copying your favourite.
Bear in mind, this is like 30 years on. This is 30 years from Nirvana now. We're in 2024, and you're talking like what, a year, 2 years ago?
A couple of years ago. Obviously, I'm not going to throw shade, but I remember one band in particular that I played with when I was in Saturn Split. Two of their songs I distinctively picked up straight away, that they were the same chords, same notes as two Nirvana songs, and I was just like, that's a bit scummy. But we're getting off on a tangent here. But I think it goes to show like the influence of them. But I do think, well, we never really came up with a thing. I would say overrated to an extent.
It's one of them, isn't it? That at the time, obviously, he was very iconic and stuff, and he obviously passed away, and he's left a legacy that you feel he's done. What was the term it's used in Batman? You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And again with Tupac, Tupac's a man with criminal records for not very nice things, and died a legend, died an icon, died a hero. But if they'd have lived to their full lives, would they be lauded in quite the same bracket? Who knows? I look at it and you're going to love this, Metallica. To compare it to Metallica, right? If
they're one of my overrateds I was going to bring up.
Well, sorry, but they have released some bad albums as the years have gone on. But if they'd have stopped mid-90s, they'd have been regarded as never releasing a bad album and incredible. But they've released so many duds since 2000 onwards.
I feel like this is a good jumping point, actually, because I was going to bring them up. I think we'll just wrap up the Nirvana there, unless you've got anything else to say about them.
No, I just think they follow a very distinct pattern in that all the overrated artists have done. But I just wanted your opinion if you thought they were overrated or underrated. My personal opinion is I think they're a little bit of both. They weren't given enough time to truly show the genius they were capable of, or to crumble and show how little genius they had. They were such a small space in time, but for the time they were given, I think they're overrated, personally.
Yeah, it's all a matter of if they could have kept up that momentum. Right, okay, so this may be the last podcast I ever do because the amount of hate I get online for this, but Metallica, I'm gonna get angry here. I'm gonna get a bit Saint
Don't
anger.
get angry with me.
I'm gonna get a bit Saint anger over this. I think Metallica are one of the most overrated bands on the planet, bar none. I don't know a single band that has had so many and I'm talking disastrous, even to the point where all their fans agree. All their fans agree they've had so many absolute disaster monstrosities of albums, and they are still regarded as like gods of rock and roll and gods of metal. And I think it is 100% unjustified and undeserved. I don't give a fuck about the Black Album or Enter Sandman or Master of Puppets or any of that fucking shit. They do not deserve the popularity they are given. After, no, not even Saint Anger, the stuff they did in the 90s, Load and Reload, and the whole kind of transformation. And then, as you say, obviously Saint Anger, and then the album they did with Lou Reed, that was an absolute fucking car crash of an album. An absolute dog bin of a fucking record. And the thing is the fans don't disagree. But they sell out stadiums. They are fucking massive, and it wrecks my brain. I don't think their greatest hits are that good. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I don't want to be like this, but...
To lie down after that. Do you need a rest?
I need to lie down, a cuddle, and a wank.
Wow. Well, you're going to get none of them from me. Yeah, but I agree to... I really like Metallica, like Ride the Lightning, the Black Album, Load and Reload. I think they're fantastic, and that's just my opinion, and that's okay. I think they're really good. I thought the Death Magnetic album, when they did like a comeback in like 2007, again, went back to the roots. Fantastic. Really appreciated that happened, but the duds in between are big. The Lulu album was a car crash. It was artistic, my opinion, and I think that the sales of it kind of showed the backlash it got. That album shouldn't have existed. That album, in theory, didn't exist. That album, in practice, shouldn't exist. Who knows? Overrated, absolutely. I think there's some incredible musicians in there. Kirk Hammett's a phenomenal guitar player. Rob Trujillo, one of my favourite bass players of all time from back when he was in Suicidal Tendencies. Amazing bass player. Superb individual talent. And Lars Ulrich, as people hate him, he's a phenomenal drummer. And no one can really argue with that. He's a great rock drummer. But as a band, absolutely overrated. 100% agree.
I don't want to make people upset. Everyone is entitled to the music.
Too late for that, John.
I know plenty of people who fucking adore Metallica, and you know all the power to you. But I've pretty much had this view on them since I was a teenager. I think I did a bit of a dive into them when I was young because everyone around me was just, dick riding them. I did come away with some stuff that I did like from them, but I was always the one who was sat there going, I don't get this. I just don't get it. As you say,
like me with Iron Maiden.
Yeah, like exactly what you've just said before. The talent hurts me to say. The talent is there. The talent is there. That they are talented musicians. I think as people, they have proven to be quite bad people.
I don't know whether that's just a show, though.
Yeah, but you look at the stuff of how they treated. What was that bassist they had? Was it Jason?
Jason Newsted.
Stuff like that. The treatment of them. If you watch that documentary, which I love, by the way, that's some kind of monster documentary.
Great film.
That is the best car crash that I've ever witnessed in my life, and you kind of just see dickheadness, the dickhead behaviour that kind of comes from that band. Where it's what I always liked about Iron Maiden is they just seem like a cute bunch of lads that go to the pub, and they're a bit sweet and nice and
very
lovely.
down to earth.
Yeah.
Whereas Metallica are so far from that, and I see that. But that was a good shout with the overrated. Metallica do come into that massively. And that's as a Metallica fan.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and then I think we'll wrap this episode up. I think we've probably upset enough people. So this is a band that I know that you were very big on back.
Oh, go on then.
So I think we should get quite a bit, and it's a band again. Like we've said throughout the whole thing, is I get it. I understand the talent. I appreciate them for what they do, but for me, it's never hit, and I've just never understood the wide popularity. Muse.
Okay. Well, yeah, like you've said there, I was a massive Muse fan. I took a lot of influence as a bass player, especially from Chris Wolstenholme, Matt Bellamy as well. Like they're all fantastically talented, really, really good musicians, right? That I don't think that can be denied. I loved them. I understand why they're divisive. A lot of people compared them to Radiohead when they first came out because of the moodiness, you could argue. They're almost like if Radiohead mixed with Queen. And the reason I say that is because with Queen, like a lot of operatic stuff, again, and they could be in an overrated list of their own. They're another greatest hits band, aren't they? The duds are duds. There's a lot of fillers. Yeah. With Muse, there's a lot of filler as well. And I'm a big fan of them. And I think, is it the last 2 or 3 studio albums that they've released now? I have not given the time of day for. They've not changed enough. They've not offered enough. They've hit their peak. They were amazing. I've seen them live. Fantastic band. But I think they're on the decline now. And I understand why they're not everyone's cup of tea. But they were mine. And I still listen back fondly to their older material, but not their later stuff.
I think that's kind of why I've kind of pulled that band, really, is what you just said, is the decline. And like I did on my Metallica rant, which was partly comical, guys. Please, honest, I don't think they're that bad. But I don't.
Someone's going to have your face on a dartboard.
They are, aren't they? But I think that's it with bands, is sometimes they're put on such a pedestal where it's like they can't do no wrong, and it's kind of like you start getting these diminishing returns, and it's like it gets to the point where you look at them and you got to be like, were you ever that good in the first place, or was it all a bit of smoke and mirrors? You know what I mean? When you look into music and you start really looking into like the process of it, and that you find out that sometimes it's the people behind the curtain that make it all work. It's the right producer, it's the right management and stuff like that. And if you look at bands if you think of one of your favourite bands that you think have started to decline in years' time, look at who was producing their albums back in their peak and look who's doing it now. And I think the signs are there sometimes. I have no clue about Muse or anything like that. I think they've kind of become too big for their own boots in a way. And the songs from Muse I do like is from their earlier days when they had a bit more fire in the belly, so to say, and they weren't trying to write out songs like directly to be played in large stadiums and stuff like that. I think they've become pretty overly operatic in their themes and stuff, and I think it is starting to deter away from kind of,
I appreciate the mention though for Muse. I think that's a good one. That's a good shout. So we've got all of our overrated and some of our maybe not. I do have a list of underrated artists and your opinion on them as well, John. I don't think the underrated artist is going to be as long.
Should we save that for the next episode?
We can do that.
Okay, well, that's been another episode of the Who Asked for This podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry if we've upset you and said nasty things about your favourite bands. All the power to you, whatever you like. Follow us on the socials. I'm not really great at these outros, so I'm just going to end the episode here. Goodbye.